pictures and it would just go da 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 da.
Did you ever use
That was the best one
on Instagram?
No.
So you could just like you do a boomerang or just like you do a normal, you'd hold it and it would record and
Snapchat has
then it would play it back and it would be a rewind. That was my favorite one because you just set shit up and it'd spill out and then it'd all come back together.
Do you hear they're taking away likes?
Yes, I did hear that.
Like this week.
That's why we need good comments.
All right, we're doing another Francy in the Law episode. Okay, gotta do that again.
Maybe with Mike's Francy.
Yeah, well,
Hello.
I usually
testing.
remember 45-degree angle
45.
for maximum
ASMR.
Okay,
Mm.
every time.
You want to hold it out like this so you look real comfortable.
Are you into those videos, or is this just something you like to joke about?
I am not into those videos. I've never really watched any.
All right, we're running.
You have.
All right, welcome back to another episode of Francy and the Law. I'm your co-host, Dan the Law Wilson. With me, as always, is Francesca Francy Bruschetta. She's here with, first and foremost, an update on when she'll be doing her paint and sips next.
Yeah, I have quite a few, but you can see all of the classes at paintingwithcanvas.com. I do have a fun Paint Your Pet that's coming up at Copper Still, the one in Chandler off of Chandler and the 10. That's going to be a lot of fun. And yeah, it comes with a pre-drawn canvas, also a digital painting of your pet that you can reference during the class too. But yeah, it's going to be lots of fun. Drink, paint your pet, get a frame. Made by Ryan.
When was that again?
November 23rd, Saturday at 1 p.m. Copper Still.
Cool. So should we move into today's subject or more?
Well, why don't you? Did you get another case dismissal today?
Oh, current event in it? All
Yeah,
right.
why
Yeah,
not?
yeah. I did. Yeah, I got, well, not a case. It was a charge, but
Okay.
it's hard to get these things dismissed. It was an extreme DUI. So, yeah, there was a lot of things for me to point out if the case would have gone to trial on the extreme charge. So we got that one dismissed.
Good job.
And, yeah, there's a lot of science that goes into DUIs. There's also a lot of junk science. So that's kind of what
What do you
we
mean?
dealt with. Well, so they couldn't get a blood draw, right?
Okay.
So they got a warrant, and then they did a hospital draw. And at the hospital, of course, they got better phlebotomists. It's not just basically like a cop
In a little
doing it.
van.
Somebody who does it for a living, just that. They're
Phlebotomist.
yeah, at the hospital. So they're better at picking veins there, bottom line. And then, but by the time they got the vein and got the blood draw, the 2-hour window had passed. So they do what's called a retrograde, where they essentially backdate to what the blood would have been within 2 hours of driving. Now, if the blood is, let's say, 2 hours and 1 minute from the time they were driving, they still have to go back that 1 minute and disclose their analysis. This was a little bit further. I think it was 3 hours or so. So the data and the analysis that these experts use, toxicologists, is basically based on a bunch of, they come up with a conclusion as to what somebody's blood alcohol content would be within 2 hours. They're like, well, it probably would have been between 0.13 and 0.18 based on how much this person ate and drank. But in my case, they didn't really have an interview with the person as to how much they ate and how much they drank. So they didn't really have reliable data, and that backdating would have been based on a lot of different assumptions. So that's how we were able to get that charge dismissed.
Don't they a lot of times they call that the half-life. The half-life of that alcohol, how long it would take you to metabolize it.
No, they
is that
don't.
the same thing?
They don't call it that.
So you've got.
No, they may. I don't know.
So like every
I've
drug
never
has a
heard 'em say
half-life for how long it will stay in your system or metabolize.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the way that they register that, and what's the other one that they've done in Arizona in the last
probably 5 or 6 years with DUIs where if they can prove that you've been in your vehicle under a certain number of hours and your blood alcohol comes back, not that you were pulled over in your vehicle, but say you're at your home, your residence, they can prove that you drove there. They take your blood and it comes back at a certain number, they can actually give you a DUI if your blood alcohol content is at a place where they'll take it back and put you in your vehicle with your blood alcohol content at that. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. Those are what's called APC cases, or actual physical control cases. It's a case where nobody sees anyone driving. Or if they do have an eyewitness to driving, they may just call it a traditional driving case. But typically, if somebody's like sitting in their car not driving it, or nobody saw them driving, but there's some sort of circumstantial evidence that they were driving, they can say, oh, look, at some point this person had control over the vehicle, or they could have posed an immediate danger, or they were about to drive the vehicle, things like that. But the facts scenario that you describe would most likely result in a dismissal in the city of Phoenix. Other cities like Gilbert, they're harder on everybody out there, of course, for DUIs. So sometimes when you're at home, they'll just interview you and say, hey, look, did you just drive this car here? You're drunk. You want to be nice. You like cops. You don't want to be rude. Just say, oh, yeah, I came back from the bar. And then they run your blood and then you're done. But, yeah, so that goes back to my number one rule, which is don't talk to cops.
And don't drink and drive.
There's a lot of law discussion. To give people out there in the podcast universe a heads up as to why we kind of started out with the law and why I'm talking more than I probably would be just about the law in general, is because what we watched this week didn't really have any police in it because it was a Stephen King movie. We saw Dr. Sleep. So in Stephen King's world, there's really no such thing as police. And if there are, they're usually very ineffective at their job. So I think there was a litany.
Is that why everyone got away with everything?
Yeah.
Like all the.
At some point, there was like some hilarious line like, oh, yeah, don't worry about them. They don't care about the cops. And they just kind of moved on.
I didn't recognize that or like realize that there weren't any cops in there until you mentioned that today. I was like, oh, yeah, there weren't. Mm-hmm. What did you think about it?
That was a bit of a plot hole. I wanted to see more cop interaction because I think that's always interesting when you throw cops, who are trained for one thing into like a supernatural scenario. I think I combined supernatural and scenario right there.
What'd you call it?
Super scenario?
There you go.
Yeah. I'm going to add that to the dictionary. But, what'd you think, though, about, like, Dr. Sleep? Since you're an artist and you watched the first one, The Shining, right beforehand.
Yeah,
so you got to see kind of the cinematography of the original versus now. And what was your impression of that?
Yeah, well, I saw it, like, 10 years ago. And then before we went and saw it, I was like, before we saw Dr. Sleep on, what was it, Sunday? I was like, I don't remember. I remember the plot. I know like a lot of the climax of it, but it just didn't really, I should just give it another try. But it was way different. Also, Ryan was explaining every small detail because apparently how many times have you seen it, you think? The Shining?
Shining, I don't know, probably 40, 50 times over the years.
DVD in his very organized DVD collection.
Yeah, me too. I love The Shining.
It's the best.
But no, it was.
We vibe on a lot.
It was good. I liked how I don't know, but in comparison to Dr. Sleep, it was very different. It was very much more modern. One thing I kind of liked about The Shining was there was just no people. It was very like that. It made that the loneliness of that really kind of added. I just think it added to the just more intense of a. Not scary, was like kind of more realistic, whereas there was a lot more magic in this one, which I'm all about, like magic and witchery, and I really want that woman's hat, but that was the only thing that was like, well, now we're like dealing with a lot more magic and scariness, and maybe there was just a lot more stimulation in this movie.
Can we talk about the hat, though?
liked it.
Why are you so obsessed with this
I don't know. I
hat?
like hats in general, but I have like a really that one. Grab that real quick. I was like, I haven't been able to find it, and I
We're
just
off
saw
frame.
it. Well, I know, but
Nice.
yeah. So this is like a mini version.
No, that's bigger than the hat
Yeah.
she had.
That's what I'm. No, I meant she has. Oh no, I meant she has like a mini version of this. That's why. Like I like this guy, but I want one that is like smaller. So I feel like I've just had a acquired taste to it. for a while.
Did you think that the hat had some sort of symbolism behind it?
Just she
'Cause
looked more
she-
badass with it.
She was a little like, I'm not gonna do anything without my hat, kind of Indiana Jones vibe.
Mm-hmm.
Well, don't
Well,
you
she
think
was
too?
doing magic with it in the big.
there
part
there
of
was
it.
a weird vibe with. So Grandpa, no spoilers. Obviously was old, right? As they start talking and recapping of things that he did over his life, and they're naming certain things that generationally wouldn't make sense for us in the last few decades. We're talking
Uh-huh.
about this guy's maybe thousands of years old. She kind of had like a steampunk vibe, and her boyfriend,
Yeah.
the new, what looked like, not Jared Leto. What's the other dude? The Pirates guy.
Oh, Johnny Depp.
Yeah, he's
Donnie
like the new
Depp.
Johnny Depp looking character, but like Native American.
Yeah.
And he kind of had like a little bit of a steampunk vibe. So there was something going on there with that hat, because that
Yeah, so they
hat
did- they
is
did a good
that
job
Did
with
any of
it.
us read the book? No, we should
No,
probably
but I
say
did
that.
hear something. Well, we talked about that
Here's
Yeah,
something
with
about
Aaron.
what.
the difference that he was a psychiatrist in the book.
Oh.
Although I did not confirm that. We've just heard that.
Yeah.
But-
Did you guys read The Shining though?
No.
Anybody? No. I think I read that, but it was a long time ago, so I don't really remember it.
Well, you said that there was the big difference in the very beginning of the Shining with the car.
Well, with so many things, it'd be interesting to see here, because there will be tons and tons of media on that movie in two things: comparing it to the original movie, and then again comparing it to the book, because the discrepancies between the original Shining, Kubrick, and Stephen King's Shining, they clashed on so many things. And there's all these documentaries that have come out over the years of how feuding they were over whether or not the Volkswagen in the beginning is red or yellow or all sorts of things. There's a feud. So it'd be interesting to find out with this one how different it is from the book, and again whether or not they feuded about, or if at this point in his career Stephen King's like, nah,
Wait,
it's going to be
Stephen
made.
King's still alive?
Yeah, he's alive.
He is, right?
R.I.P.
No, he's
No, is
alive. He's alive.
He's
Okay.
alive.
But when he wrote The Shining, and when The Shining got made, like with Carrie and other, he's not the Stephen King that he is now. He
Oh,
was
sure.
on drugs. He was an alcoholic, which I'm sure played into the character that he wrote for the dad.
Yeah.
Was him projecting his own demons on why he doesn't have kids and all that stuff. Then now, and I'm assuming he wrote it much later after the Shining movie was made. I don't know, actually.
Doctor Sleep.
Uh-huh.
When was it made?
But now he's sober, doesn't even smoke cigarettes anymore. And it, still right. So it'd be interesting to see what the differences there were.
Yeah. Yeah, I really liked
It was made in 2013.
the book.
The book.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, I really liked how his character's whole struggle kind of saved him from confronting these demons, and then demons from finding him, which was, I think, kind of just like Stephen King's life in a way, where he was just like, doing all those kind of drugs.
Did you like that they added
or
the?
tons of drugs and writing like crazy and not really having to confront reality, which is why his books are just so fun and wild and kind of all over the place at the same time. But did I like what?
That there was more magic in it, and more people, and
More Shining?
yeah.
Yeah. It was basically, in many ways, it felt like the like X-Men meets The Shining almost.
Yeah.
Like those, there's been a couple of movies where it's like, well, pretty much every X-Men movie's had like a big group of evil X-Men versus a big group of, good X-Men. And here we kind of had the same thing for sure. Whereas like supernatural and magic and everyone had their powers and they were each kind of unique. And it got me wondering if Stephen King kind of or is a comic book fan. I don't even know. But a lot of it felt kind of like a comic book movie in a weird way, which is, I think, why it seemed a lot faster paced than The Shining, of course. But they're two completely different movies from my perspective. But, I guess visually then, do you think that the new Shining could kind of even compare to the original?
Well, I mean, I think it's way better, but I think there was just a lot more going on, whereas I kind of like the
original's
simplistic.
way better?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know. Like visually, maybe it was like super old. I mean, the Doctor Sleep was great. Like they did a great job with it. But I don't know. There was something really eerie about it.
Well, and a couple
compared
of
to
things with The Shining, it was shot in film. So they also had these giant, majestic, wide shots, establishing shots. And Kubrick liked to do that one shot take. There's a bunch of those that have been studied over the years that are like the shots that people study in film school. The opening credit, the big long as the car's driving up into the mountains. That's all one helicopter, what would now be done with a drone.
Yeah.
But back then they flew it on a helicopter with this giant film camera. So that's something different that you're just not going to replicate.
They did the same thing. Was that was
That
done?
one is my favorite shot. Do you know what shot she's talking about where he's riding the big wheel through the thing? I didn't know this until I saw a documentary about it, but it's just so cool looking, and the sound of him hitting the carpet and then hitting the hardwood and the carpet
and the
and
fact
the
it's
hardwood.
behind him.
But
You're
I
not
guess
watching him.
as he's spiraling the hotel, he actually changes floors. So even though he never goes up or down, there's one shot as he turns a corner and you can see down into the dining hall. And as he's riding on that same, because it's all one single shot, when he turns another corner, he's now in the dining hall. And those are the carpets that he rolls over. So little things like that don't make any sense, didn't need to happen. They were way over the top, extravagant as far as like designing them and having to figure. But he did those to confuse and also add to just the magnificentness of his film technique. And I don't know if I saw a lot of that in this one. Did some cool shots, but nothing that you're like, wow, that's spectacular.
You hit the nail on the head there. Yeah. I was very much like, where's the wide shot? Where are the cool shots of the hotel? And then, spoiler alert, we should say, finally at the end they end up at the hotel. And then a few of those shots came out, but none of them were as grand. The I guess ballroom, when they redid that was gorgeous, and I was like, ooh, this is legit. But I kind of, or this isn't a legit homage, but I kind of wish they would have tried a little bit more on the cinematography front earlier on in the movie to kind of establish the same tone that the first one had, because like a lot of like the shots in the woods just kind of reminded me more of Twilight than it did The Shining. You know what I mean?
One other thing, we're talking about the cinematography. The one shot, there's all those little shots. There's some of my favorite shots in The Shining. You've got the big wheel. You've got obviously one of the most famous ones of maybe all time of all film is the two shot of the two girls at the end of the hallway holding hands. Super creepy. The other one is the shot of him, the little kid Danny, wearing the Apollo 11 polo sweater, standing on what then was all the conspiracy theory about whether Kubrick made the moon landings. and faked those and all the little homages that he had to that, right? To Room 237, all those. But the other one was the maze. The dad in the first one dies in the maze. It's the last shot of the film outside of them going in and doing all the stuff with the pictures. And then they go back, and no spoiler alerts about what happens at the end, but outside of the boxes being shown in that maze, there's, I mean, the most epic shot was the shot of the maze. They're looking down on it on a table, and the camera goes from a wide shot in a room looking down at a table, model table, and then they zoom in, and then Danny and the mom, Olive, from whatever her name was, right, from Popeye, they're walking in the maze, and you're like, what? How does that happen? It was such a cool shot. It was like groundbreaking for its time, and there was nothing in it, not even close. And you're like, well, you guys you fucked up there.
Yeah. I think they did a little bit because I mean the story's great. Doctor Sleep, the source material was amazing. I was eating up. I was like good popcorn movie, keeping me going.
You had
but
our popcorn. We
I
give you
think-
our popcorn. It was so cold in that theater.
I like it cold. Well, I run.
We
hot.
also had a lot of noisy theater people again. Is
Yeah,
that-
but before we get to that, let's talk about your guys' scores.
Okay.
For this one, what do you give it? 1 to 10.
You go first.
I'm gonna give it an 8.3.
Okay.
What was the original for you?
Yeah.
That's as. Oh.
It's one of my
it-
favorite movies of all time.
I know. I'm with you on that one. I gotta give it the 9.9 because I might see a better movie someday. As far as horror
So,
movies go.
Oh, that's high too, because I didn't even. I was like, I'm always like
9.5 for Shining.
9.5, 9.6 for me is pretty high because I don't know if I score much
'Cause
else.
Horror's
up
my
there.
favorite genre.
Yeah.
Is it?
And that's just like a perfect.
Why do you like to be
Yeah,
scared?
and I was in those classes like you talk
The bet,
about where
yeah.
we
You study
when I
them
was
and-
in film school for a minute there. Yeah, we studied all those shots. We talk about and watch that movie, and it was just there's so much going on. You could have 10 podcasts just on that movie alone. But
Oh, for sure.
yeah, we're here to talk about Dr. Sleep, so that's why I give that one 8.3. But what'd you give it?
I'd say probably like 7.
Mm-hmm.
Just only I think I would have probably scored it higher.
Was that because the
without
kids on their
Shining.
phones in front of us?
No, that was. We had to shut it down though.
Yeah, we did
You
good.
shut that down. I shut down the other kids.
Ryan, what do you give it?
You know what I didn't like? I'll give him a pass on the cinematography
Yeah.
because that's so hard to do. How many geniuses are out there that do that? It's tough. So it was shot really well. It looked good. I didn't like the whole breathing steam and
Are you talking about like the
canistering.
background notice or music?
Like them actually breathe, like when people
Oh.
are in like pain inflicted and all that. It just seems so far-fetched and so outside of what was the first one.
Mm-hmm.
If there was a reference or anything that had been touched in The Shining that made it seem like these people had some sort of steam inside of them that could help
Yeah.
zombies live forever, then maybe I'm like, oh, wow, it's crazy how they turned it into that. But it just seemed like squeezing blood from a stone of this amazing idea, this amazing story. The story was really good. But visually, the whole thing about the steam and all that, to me, it seemed like The Mummy, where like these monsters just explode into sand dust and then turn into a wave of whatever scorpion. Like it just was like so far-fetched that to me it went from being like a psychological thriller horror to almost science fiction fantasy.
yeah.
And they lost me a little bit on that one.
Yeah, but
You liked it.
You like
I
that.
get it, but I only liked it on the murder scene where they murder the kid, and that sounds
That
awful
one was good.
to say that, but it was the first movie I'd seen in a while in the theater where I was like, oh, I have a real villain. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, they really commit the crime. You can see the blood. It's a child being murdered. It's super intense. There's
Pretty
a
graphic.
theater full of children watching this thing, and they're all just like, everyone's kind of putting down their phone, like, "Whoa, okay," And it's just that's kind of what you need.
They tied a little kid down and staked him,
Yeah.
and then that was brutal.
That's what you need to hate Rebecca Ferguson, because she's gorgeous. She's got the cool hat, cool vibes going on. She's very likable, charming actress and character. And that's when I kind of really got invested in the movie, because I was like, it shifted and drew my attention in, because so many movies were just like Marvel or whatever, where he took out a whole city, the villain of the
No
week.
blood.
And there's no blood, and I was like,
No
I didn't know
tears.
any of the people in that city, and didn't really care about the characters, and so I kind of value movies on whether I care about
Get invested.
people on screen, whether that means I hate them or not.
Mhm.
I think that's great. So,
So I was gonna give it an 8 flat.
yeah,
Still
Okay.
pretty good.
good.
It was good. I
Yeah.
liked it. They just it wasn't a 9.5. It wasn't like right there
Were
with The
there-
Shining.
Did they have as many? Because the heartbeat was so much in that one. The sound.
Yeah, the sound was.
I don't
amazing.
remember them having that much of that in The Shining. I liked all the strings in The Shining. It felt like because you said that they had a symphony for Doctor Sleep.
No, for The Shining.
Oh, I thought you said for Doctor Sleep as well. That was what was so cool about, I think, the soundtrack. It just literally, you could envision people in a symphony, like making. It wasn't digitized. It wasn't made from a computer. And
Did we
you
ever
could just
did we ever
really
look
hear
that up? We didn't look that up. We were going to. I should have looked this up before. Maybe we'll have to.
Look what up.
I had heard years ago that after The Shining came out, because they actually used an orchestra to record all of the audio for it. It's a whole performance. That they had toured that off Broadway with an orchestra that just played The Shining music, and it's so crazy how much music came from or was sampled from little tracks in The Shining, little things. Everyone has their own theme song in that movie. You don't realize that. What's his name? The chef, the black guy that is the first guy that kind of tells Danny that he can also shine. I can't remember
I
that
forget
character's
the
name.
character's name.
But every time he comes into frame, he has his own. Like they show him in his apartment, and he's got these naked, like bohemian, beautiful naked black women with crazy fros up on his walls, and it's like all red. Do you remember that? So you see that, and you're like, oh, that's not what. He's just such a nice guy, or whatever. But he has this theme music that every time he comes on, you're like, oh, that fits for whatever reason. Danny comes into frame. The dad comes into frame. If the mom's involved, they flow those things into these little clips of those strings, whatever orchestra. That again, they missed that in Dr. Sleep because you just didn't have the same feeling for the score. The music is just it's different. But I had heard that they had toured that soundtrack, and that would be a cool thing to go to.
Yeah, I think it was the strings aren't there in this one, but the sound effects were great. And I think the theater we were in had such good surround that it made up for the lack of a cool original score. Almost. But yeah, so I would love to rewatch The Shining and then this one and think just about the sound to see if there's any callbacks to the original score in the new one. I'm sure there's a million, but I need to go back and listen again. But yeah, the last thing I want to say is, what's up with you and McGregor needing to be in like dead baby movies?
So we didn't talk to you about this. Me and Danny were laughing about it. So you saw Trainspotting. Have you seen Trainspotting? So Trainspotting's Ewan McGregor.
You're gonna hit me with that mic.
He's a heroin addict. All of him and his buddies are heroin addicts. It took place in Scotland,
Yes.
UK, Scotland. They're soccer fans, right? Football fans, and they're drug addicts, and they're young. They're all partying. They're making terrible decisions, right? They're all shooting dope, and one of their friends has this baby. And they go over and they party at their house, and the baby obviously is being neglected and dies.
It's the same story in this
Same
movie.
story.
With the same actor.
And he's losing his mind on heroin, and he's looking around this room, and he sees this bloated dead baby climbing on the ceiling and upside down and going crazy. And so then in the movie, spoiler alert, there's a big bloated dead baby hiding under the lady that rolls over, and she's been partying, doing drugs with him. And remember, he like gave the kid like some Cheez-Its and I don't know, like rolled a couple of lines of coke and fucking bounced.
I don't remember the baby being dead. Did I go to? Was that when I went in the bathroom?
Later.
You might have been in the bathroom.
Oh, maybe.
I went real. I mean, it was.
You don't remember? It was real quick. It was just him having a bad flashback, but it was a dream, and she rolled over, and this dead baby's underneath her.
Yeah, that might have been my.
You got blinders on.
Yeah. But that was funny because it definitely was like. It's like the same thing with John Cusack. Every movie he's in, there's like a rain scene. It's got to be written into his contract where he's got to be out in the rain and like it's coming to, and he's got a leather jacket on for some reason still.
All right. Well, we've talked a lot about it. I'm sure we could think of more things to discuss. But, yeah, we've got our scores out there. Anything else you want to discuss?
No, I think
gonna
I'm
call it?
good. Yeah,
No current events?
just painting. Getting new painting portraits and everything for the holidays. I'm getting those all scheduled and put in for custom order. So you can see my other stuff at Francy bestedart.com. I have all my art on there.
Oh, okay.
Too.
When are you going to paint Francy and the Law?
Oh, I don't know.
Or
We'll have to come up with
FATL.
have to come up with something.
The viewers want to know. There's a lot of them, especially the ones that make it to the end. They want to see a big sign.
Yeah. Okay, maybe we'll give you a T-shirt for that too.
Yeah, FATL. People are like, what's fatal? Well, why don't you listen in? All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. See you next time. Cool. Well, do you just want to get a photo of us in here?
Yeah.
Cool. Well, maybe I'll put this one.